Hey everybody, Natalie Antonov here with Gable Music Ventures. We're here again with another interview with the music industry experts. And today we have someone super awesome and super amazing. We have John Faye. He's the Philly rock veteran lead singer of 90s alternative rock band, the Caulfields. He's got over 3 decades in the music business under his belt, songwriting and performing in bands like Ike, John Faye Power Trip, John and Brittany, John Faye and Those Meddling Kids. He's toured nationally, internationally, sharing stages with over 60 acts that are nationally known. He's got 11 full-length studio albums, 2 live albums, a B-sides record, 3 EPs, a DVD, some digital singles, and has song placements in some major films and television shows. At some point in there, he found time to become a producer and teach songwriting at Drexel for 16 years, and most recently completed writing his memoir. With that kind of resume, he can write multiple memoirs as far as I'm concerned. I'm thrilled he's sitting down to talk to us today with Gable Music Ventures and our interview with the Expert Series. So we'll be with you in just a minute. Hey John, how you doing?
Hi Natalie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, thank you. I am so excited to talk to you today. How's this whole year, this whole pandemic been for you? Good, bad? Eh?
I think it's been like for a lot of people, good and bad. You know, I mean, I think like everybody, it was just such a foray into the unknown and not quite knowing what you were going to do and what was happening. And, so I think that kind of like implants like this anxiety in a person, but it also yielded a lot of what I'll call life lessons for me. And I think on the whole, I mean, I feel very grateful to have weathered it pretty well.
Well, we're grateful you weathered it well too. And that you're here with us today. So let's go back to the beginning here, because you have quite the resume of all sorts of different things, most of what I mentioned and then some more. So what drew you initially into music?
Oh, so we're going way back. Honestly, music became part of my life at a really early age, just in terms of it being a presence. I grew up in a household with 3 older sisters, all of whom were at least a decade older than I was. So their teenage record collection became like the foundation of my love for music, and luckily they had pretty good taste. So they were growing up, right around, the time of, like the late era of the Beatles and the Beach Boys, and, so late 60s, early 70s, a lot of singer-songwriter stuff, your Carole King, your, Cat Stevens, like
oh yeah,
all that
good stuff.
And, so that music was always kind of like around in our house. A couple of my sisters also kind of played piano, like they took piano lessons. So it was in the air, let's say. But, if you were to ask them, they would not say, oh, we're musical or we're musicians or anything. But it just sort of existed in my little world at the right time for it to really kind of seep in. And then I would say around the time my dad passed away, which was when I was pretty young, about 6.5, music started to become an escape for me. So I was really diving into songs at a pretty early age, in terms of like, I think I started like paying attention to lyrics maybe earlier than your average kid. Mm-hmm. And, the power of that, and just, the power of, what a melody could do, what a melody can do in your brain. You get the dopamine shot,
Absolutely.
And so I would say that was my introduction to music. And then as I sort of grew into my teen years, that's the period when everybody kind of discovers their own stuff, not the stuff that your parents or your siblings were listening to. And that was a really formative time as well.
So at what point did you decide, hey, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life? Or was there a point? I mean,
I think there were, I don't know if there was like this like light bulb epiphany moment. I mean, I knew I loved it. And like, to be honest with you, I was pretty creative in other ways before music kind of like became front burner for me. So when I was a teenager, I was, my friends and I were like making movies on a Super 8 camera. We were like, writing a lot of song parodies. I knew how to like, switch out real lyrics with like my own, dumb, dirty lyrics and stuff like that. So that was actually my first actual songwriting, probably.
Like a Weird Al Jr.
Kind of, yeah, but much dirtier, so much more filthy. You wouldn't even believe it. But yeah, so I always kind of felt like I would do something creative, but I didn't really start seriously attempting to play music until I was probably about 14. That's when I bought my friend's drum set for $40. And that was my first thing that I did where I was really kind of like taking music seriously in the sense of trying to play it. And then eventually I started to try to, write a couple songs with some friends in high school who knew how to play guitar. And I was the drummer, and, that was kind of like the genesis of all of it. And from there, it feels to me, even though you mentioned so many different kind of iterations of my musical life, it feels to me like just one long odyssey
Odyssey would be a good word for that.
of learning how to do things and becoming more self-sufficient as a musician and a songwriter. Going from whichever band I was in into whatever situation came next. There was always like a sense of, okay, well now I'm going to try to add this element to what I do. Mm-hmm. So it's just like all part of the same thing to me.
Got it. Did you officially go to school for music at all?
Oh God, no. I was fairly antisocial as a kid, so I didn't even do like, high school band or chorus or any of that stuff. Like I did take drum lessons briefly. And I guess when I started to get serious about being a lead singer, I took vocal lessons for several months, as long as I could afford to do it. Actually, with a great Delaware musician who's still around, Jerry Smith. I don't know if you know her, but she was my vocal coach. And I still give her so much credit for, making me focus on my voice and what it could do. And so that's really my only official music education. Everything else is
it's good to know that it's possible to learn all these things as your journey progresses, as opposed to going to school specifically and paying for it if you don't have the money, that you were able to figure it out.
Honestly, I was just lucky to be surrounded by people who were really good at what they did. Like all of my bandmates, even from early on, were pretty good musicians, especially compared to me. So I was able to, you glean things. You pick up little things just by observing. And, so by the time, like the Caulfields started, for example, I felt confident enough in my guitar playing that I could write more songs completely on my own. And that kind of confidence just it leads to a different phase of, someone as a musician. So it's kind of just, you pick things up along the way.
Gotcha. So now that you mentioned it, I was actually going to go into the Caulfields. So this is a perfect segue. The Caulfields, you're right. For those of you who may or may not remember, it was a rock and roll band, right? Alternative rock band from the 90s. You guys landed a major record deal, achieved huge popularity, toured all over the world, made music videos, etc. ... Did that feel like an overnight success, or was it more like the slow game, years working underground, long nights, all that kind of fun stuff?
Yeah, so I guess like tying back into what I said about it just being one long odyssey, it very much on the surface would appear like, oh, these guys formed in 1992 and a year later they have a record contract. But all of us had been at it for a decade up to that point, pretty much, or close to a decade. And yeah, it definitely, it did not feel like an overnight thing, but it came as kind of a shock to all of us. You know, like our band, you know, unlike how probably like 90% of all bands that get signed to labels, you know, like the label sees what you're doing in your particular town and they're like, oh, these guys are happening, you know. Caulfields were not happening. You know, like we were actually like Sam Musumeci, our bass player, and I say on a regular basis that if the series of events that sent us on the path of getting signed didn't happen when they happened, the band would have broken up within like 3 months, probably. Like we were all working jobs we hated. We were all like really discouraged with, you know, I mean, because we had been at it for a while. Mm-hmm. And another funny aspect of that is like changing the name of a band back then was not as easy as, you know, getting on your social media and being like, hey guys, I'm now rebranding as this. So we actually struggled to like get people to know that it, like the Caulfields was us, you know, because we were in a band called the Beat Clinic that was fairly well known in Delaware. Mm-hmm. And when we changed the name, all of a sudden people were like, oh, I thought you guys broke up. I didn't know you guys were a new band. So
in the pre-social media ages.
Uphill climb of just getting people to know what we were and what we were doing. But luckily, just at the right time, and I guess things happen when they're supposed to happen, we started to get a little bit of opportunity to play shows in Philadelphia. We were opening for some bigger bands there, and that's when we kind of attracted a manager who actually had ties to Richie Rubini, our drummer, his late brother Rudy, who was a producer. And Rudy is actually the person who passed our demo tape, like a literal cassette, onto Mark Mazzetti at A&M, and that's what got the ball rolling. So it was kind of serendipitous, I would say. Nothing planned or plotted about it. It was like, oh, this is happening? Okay, I guess we won't break up then. And next thing you know, like a year later, we're making a record, we're going on tour and all that stuff. It's weird.
It's funny, I asked this, you know, the same kinds of questions in a lot of these interviews, especially when I'm talking to artists who've toured and been on labels, and a lot of the times I'm hearing the same kind of response, that it's not so much that you're trying to do that one specific thing, it just kind of happens. And you have to just be ready for it at that point.
Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, we had tried for years to do what they say you're supposed to do, which is, oh, well, you got to book showcases up in New York and you got to invite all the record companies out and hope they come see you and like you and blah, blah, blah. And we did that for a long time. You know, we would schlep up to New York on a Wednesday night and, you know, play, Kenny's Castaways or some little bar. And, you know, maybe one A&R guy would come out and be like, nah. Keep at it though. They were always very encouraging. They never wanted to be like, you know, guys, you know, you gotta just pack it in, you know. Just no. It was always like, yeah, keep at it, man. Which, you know, I appreciated that encouragement, I guess. You know, I mean, every band has to have that sort of, you know, energized or bunny mentality when, you know, there's so much routine rejection in doing this that you have to almost delude yourself that like, oh, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, like, I know this is good. And you just keep going.
So what was one of the most memorable experiences you had in that whole time with the Caulfields?
Oh, I got to pick one.
Well, you can pick two if you want.
Well, I mean, look, once you're in a band and you're touring, and believe me, even though we were on a major label and even though we had a song on the radio, we were still in a van like every other band, like we never had like the tour bus thing or anything like that. So it's a very intimate situation with the same 4 or 5 people. We had tour managers and sound people that maybe rotated in and out, but it was always, the 4 of us. And to be clear, like Richie Rubini didn't join the band until our first record was recorded. Mm-hmm. So we were just getting to know each other when we got on the road together. We knew Richie. We actually all kind of idolized Richie from our early days in Newark, and he was the drummer in the Honor Society, which was like literally like the coolest band in town and all that. And so it was, everybody's just kind of like feeling out the situation the first few months, and then once you get into the rhythm of it, it becomes a very cool kind of, like a family kind of vibe, where you're all together all the time. What each other's buttons are to push if you want to piss them off. And so that was a really special aspect of it, because we were going through situations and experiences that bordered on surreal, to be honest. Mm-hmm. We encountered so many just situations that, like, I, even as a person who had dreamed of living a life as a rock musician, I was like, oh, that came out of left field. I wouldn't have expected that to happen, So it was a lot of that, almost on a daily basis.
Well, do you have any advice you'd give bands who are looking to get into this lifestyle?
Advice. Well, I would say really only do it for the right reasons. And the right reasons, by my definition, are don't expect to make it big. Don't expect to, feel fortunate to even make a living. That would be my advice, because, look, I'll say this. I think that the music business in 2021 is a far different animal than the one that I came up in 1994, 95 and all that. So I think any advice I have is really from a place of, you gotta love this. Like, you have to feel like there's, like Richie and I say this all the time, no plan B. You can adjust plan A as needed, but no plan B. Because that's the only thing that's gonna make you hungry enough to keep going. Mm-hmm. If that, whatever, if that job at the bank is just waiting for you and it's there and you're like, well, anytime I could just do that. If that's the mentality, I don't think you're gonna last very long, because you really need that, you got to be on a mission, and it has to feel like I'm a lifer. I'm in this to do it, but hey, that's just me.
No, I think that's a great piece of advice. Go big or go home, don't just half do it.
Yeah. Even now, like, having been like an independent artist, like, for far longer than I was ever a major label artist, that mentality is even more cemented in my brain, and there were definitely crossroads along the way where I had, intrusive thoughts. Well, maybe, maybe I had a good run and I should, but like, every time I thought about what the alternative looked like, it was really unappealing, and then, when the whole teaching thing came along, I just saw that as a extension of still doing what I set out to do, because in a way it was just sort of like, rather than, going out for my own gratification and like, oh, I want to be a rock star or whatever, I was kind of helping other people kind of realize what their goals were in music. And that was extremely satisfying for the decade and a half that I did it.
Cool. So back in those days, there weren't a whole lot of, or there wasn't a lot of diversity, I should say, out in the music world. You were one of the only mixed race Asian Americans signed to a major label. Sorry. How did that actually feel for you? How was that experience for you?
Well, to be honest with you, like, there weren't a lot of points during, when the Caulfields were around where I was like, I'm the only mixed race guy here. I mean, obviously, like, that changed a few years later anyway. There was a lot more inclusion, like, once the 2000s hit. But like in 1994, it was pretty much like, me and like Big Head Todd. Like, that was the only person I could really think of that was like a front man in the alternative rock world or whatever. But, like, it wasn't like a conscious thing, but I will say, like, it's more of like a lifelong thought that is always kind of there for me. It's like, yeah, there's not really a lot of people like me around. And part of that is because, maybe I grew up a little bit sheltered. I mean, let's face it, Newark, Delaware in the 80s and 90s, yeah, there were like students at the college and stuff, but like I wasn't, everybody I knew kind of was a certain way. and I was, that really kind of like ties into like so many things with me in terms of like my identity, because the fact that I am mixed, I'm half Korean and I'm half Irish. So I'm Korean and I'm Irish and I'm also neither. Like, most of the time I feel like neither. I feel like a hybrid that, is just sort of an island at times, which can be lonely sometimes, but it can also be like, all right, I'm that guy. So I have to just do my thing, So I've never really like led with my ethnicity per se. But especially in reflecting back on things and writing my book and all that, it really does make you think harder about, what really was the impact of that. And it was very impactful, I think. I mean, it informs so much of who I am, which can be, I can be just kind of like a little bit cynical, a little bit snarky about things. That's all rooted in like my collective experience growing up as that person, So I can't even remember the original question. Was it weird? Yes. A little bit.
No, it was right. It was just to see what your experience was like, if there was anything that was really, because nowadays there's more of a push, I'd say, for diversity and inclusion than there was in those times.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's probably the best time to be a guy like me. I mean, it maybe is coming a little late to like really like catapult me where I originally thought I wanted to be, but that's okay. I mean, look, I'll tell you the first line of literally the first sentence of my book in the foreword is, "Where the hell was K-pop when I needed it?"
That's great.
And so, I think about those things, but like by the same token, like I wasn't that guy anyway in 1994. Like,
yeah. It's a little different than the K-pop.
was the right place for somebody like me. That it was the place where you could get away with, a chorus on the radio that says "I'm bigger than Jesus" now. That's not a K-pop kind of thing, So
no, not really. But you did pioneer. You can consider yourself, I think, a pioneer in it, and someone who I'm sure other mixed race people probably looked up to at this point. People who identify with you, and that's something to be proud of, I think.
I didn't really realize that until pretty recently, actually, because some people have reached out to me in the past couple of years, because obviously the Caulfields first record turned 25 last year, as you may know. Mm-hmm. And so with all of the, our self-generated hoopla around that, I started to hear from people who were Caulfields fans who might have been, probably in high school or even grade school when our record came out 25 years ago. And they're telling me these incredibly touching stories of how just seeing me on a tour date or seeing our video or whatever, it made them feel like, oh, somebody that's like me is doing that. And I never knew that before. And that was a really huge, great feeling to hear that from some people. And I think you're right. Times are more accepting for, diversity and who gets their voice amplified and kind of thing. I don't. There's a fun thing that I used to hear literally all the time in the Caulfields in our first run. It was always people would see the band and they would come up to me and be like, "Oh man, you're a great singer. I would never expect that voice to come out of a guy that looks like you." And I don't think people would really say that anymore. I mean, maybe you would, but I always had to laugh at that. It's the greatest backhanded compliment one could receive.
Right. It's not like they were trying to, it's one of those.
But, so that's, if you want to really kind of dive into what my experience was like, it's that kind of stuff on a regular basis back then, which, now I've got, I've almost there's some times when I feel like I've been grandfathered into something in the music scene where it's all right, he's been doing this for 30 years. Give the guy a break,
Yeah, right. Jeez. No, for sure. And so with all that being said, do you I don't know, do you have any, I asked you earlier if you had any advice for bands that were looking to do that. Do you have any advice you would tell them not to do? To just kind of round out that little part of the interview. I want to make sure that because you have so many things that we want to talk about that we get through it all. So do you have any advice that you would say, don't do this at all?
What not to do? I don't know. Don't be a dick. That's
there you go.
That's number one. Look, all right, that'll be my semi-serious answer. Because to be honest, the thing that I think has helped me kind of navigate being a musician for all these years is that I really do treat it like every business is a people business, so you're never too good to say hello or take a picture with somebody or whatever it is that's going to help you connect with somebody who either already likes your music or may start to listen to your music because of an interaction. I feel like I've cultivated a whatever you want to call it, a network of people over the years where it's I literally know the names of 10,000 people. You know what I mean? It's always this sort of evolving community of people, and that's how I look at it. So and part of that is leading with just being an approachable, kind person. So that's the don't be a dick part. But also, another thing I will say, especially for people that are like seriously navigating the music business, don't assume that every unsolicited opinion or even solicited opinion that you get from somebody who's supposed to be a professional or a gatekeeper or tastemaker is correct.
Okay.
Which I guess means, take it for what it's worth. If there's something of value in what someone says that you think you can incorporate into improving what you do, then by all means do it. But like, have a sense of yourself, have a sense of self, and have a sense of, well, this is what I want to be doing. A lot of times, whatever it is in the music business, there will be people that maybe they'll just want to kind of like put their imprint on a situation or, in the trajectory of an artist. And it's really not necessarily the right thing for the artist. So really kind of having, that's one of the reasons why, like, I never do a thing like put it out on social media. What do you guys think I should do? Give me all your opinions.
You really want that?
You don't want that. What you want to do is cultivate a sense of like what it is you want to achieve. And if you can get advice from somebody who's been there and done that you can utilize to help forward that goal, then great. Mm-hmm. But don't let other people shape your goals, because you're going to be barking up the wrong tree time after time.
I love that piece of advice, because I definitely think it's true, but also not just within the music industry. I feel like that's a really good, just general piece of advice.
In the world.
Anyone. That was very, very well thought out. I mean, that can apply in any situation. So
and look, again, part of that might be that cynical side of me that I talked to you about earlier, where, I kind of like go on the presumption that like only 10% of the population tops knows what the hell they're doing or talking about. Tops. That's probably being really generous, but yeah.
Right. No, that's great. That's good. Oh man. All right. So, okay. So the Caulfields broke up at one point, and yes. you've continued, obviously, you're here with us after being in X amount of bands after that. I think it was at least 4, if not 4. And a lot of people would have probably called it quits at that point, and kind of being a little bit, crushed or just stopped being. What kept you motivated?
You kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, I think that was the point in my career. That was the point in my career where I felt like I was the most vulnerable and susceptible to the idea that maybe I shouldn't keep going. Mm-hmm. Because, I had been doing it for a decade. A lot of people would say like, all right, you tried to do this, you were in it for like over 10 years, you reached this height, and now that's gone. Time to move on.
Right.
And there was just something in me that I couldn't let it go. Because I don't think that the demise of the band was anything that had to do with us not being up to the task. I mean, there were so many, typical record business stuff where, people get fired from the label. So you don't have like your guy there anymore. And, labels are merging with bigger labels, and, you're getting lost in the shuffle. Like, that's the kind of stuff that kind of led to the band breaking up.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, oh, they like really gave us like our full shot, and they did everything they could to put us out there. Look, we had lots of opportunities because of that record deal. I'm never going to play that down. But we thought our second record, L, was way better than our first, and I still kind of stand by that. And it just didn't get any traction because, you know, our A&R guy got fired like literally 2 weeks or so before the record came out. And it just didn't spell, it didn't look good, you know, like our prospects really changed after that. So I kind of felt like I have a lot more to say. I'm not done doing this.
Right.
And fortunately for me, I found some new players that I had been wanting to do music with. And I found a new manager who was from Georgia, of all places, but his wife was the program director at a big radio station that had played the Caulfields, and another person that worked at that station was like, you know, you should talk to these guys about, you know, what you're going to do next. And so luckily I still had some friends from the broader music business that were willing to help me piece, and I'm eternally grateful for that, because if they hadn't stepped in when they did, then I really might not be talking to you today. You know?
All right.
So, but yeah, that was definitely a big crossroads that, and also I will say that, like, on a rare occasion, my mother gave me a pep talk that really made me realize that she was behind what I was doing. You know, a lot of times, I mean, my mother was incredibly supportive. I mean, she let my band practice in her basement and basically make her go deaf, you know, for years. But because my mom, you know, she was born in Korea, she immigrated here in the 60s, like, she didn't grow up with the kind of music that I write and play. She didn't really have a concept of it. So for her to just like throw caution to the wind, like her only son is trying to do this thing that's like a long shot for anybody, you know, I'm sure it was very worrisome for her in a lot of ways. So to hear her kind of give me the green light to keep going, you know, she basically said, you know, I know now that this isn't just something that you do, this is something that's part of who you are. That meant everything to me. And that's what just made me say, all right, I'm in it, you know?
In it to win it.
Yeah. What did I win? I don't know. I mean, it still remains to be seen.
I'm sure there's something there if we think hard enough.
No,
I'm
kidding.
So let's do a quick little thing. I do a little bit called a speed round. Nothing too exciting. These are very basic questions. It usually does not go very quickly though, but we're gonna try. I don't know why these questions are easy and then they're long. It's fine. Anyway.
People are probably thinking too hard. Let's try it.
All right. So, what's your favorite song to play? Yours or otherwise? To
play. Mm-hmm. You know, that is harder than I thought. Because it changes, you know. I mean, if I were to pick like my own song, I would probably say it's actually a song that isn't even out yet. It's called Orbit, and it's coming out in the fall. And I've been playing it acoustically and been working on the recording of it. And so that's my current favorite thing to play.
All right, well, watch out for Orbit then. All right, favorite touring city or venue?
Oh, there's lots. I would say the Caulfields, if you want to go back that far. We got to play a couple of like really, you know, venerated concert halls. You know, we played at the Fillmore in San Francisco, which was amazing. We played at a couple of places in New Orleans, like the House of Blues. You know, before there was like a House of Blues like in every major city, you know, like it was the House of Blues. And another place down there called Tipitina's, which has like tremendous history.
Love Tipitina's.
And so like being in New Orleans for as many times, you know, because our record did really well down there. So like we probably played New Orleans probably 4 times in 1995, which is kind of a lot when you're circling the whole country and everything. So we really grew to love that city. But yeah, I mean, there were just so many places that we got a chance to play where we were like, oh my God, this is, you know, like playing at like First Avenue in Minneapolis, for example. I mean, that's where like, you know, Prince filmed Purple Rain and, you know, bands that we loved from that market, like, you know, the Replacements and Soul Asylum and people like that, you know, that was like their home turf. So, you know, we always had a sense going into a particular venue of, you know, we loved that aspect of it. Like, what's the history of this place? Right. You know, that was, you know, and we played CBGB's in New York. And we also played some places that were like really kind of wacky and weird, you know, like there was a place in like North Jersey, which I don't even think is there anymore, called Club Benet, which it's literally like an old school, like dinner and a show kind of place. Like, so we're the opening act that night and we're out there like trying to play our, you know, aggressive alt rock and people are like rock chicken dinner, you know, and just sort of sitting there and you hear like silverware clinking and stuff. And it was just very bizarre and surreal, but that's part of the whole thing. It's like, you know, I kind of have grown to appreciate, you know, a weird situation is almost as good as like the, you know, the rock star dream situation to me. You know, like, okay, what weird thing did we get ourselves into? And then it just makes for a better story sometimes, you know?
Absolutely.
How many times really do you need to like play for 10,000 screaming people before it's like,
doesn't it get old? I mean,
whatever. You know, okay, but the time this happened, or you know, like,
yeah, no, it does make a better story, for sure, for sure. Have you, in all your travels, ever been starstruck opening for any of those national bands you opened for?
Pretty rarely, to be honest. Because I mean, look, in 1995, when we were doing these shows, you know, these were technically our peers, you know. So it was not really a starstruck thing. I would say like a couple times, because we were on some big like festival shows where bands we had grown up idolizing were headlining. So like that's, you know, actually we got to know the Violent Femmes pretty well. We got to know, well, we didn't get to know them, but we got to play with In Excess. It was actually the last show the Caulfields ever did before we broke up. Like, In Excess was headlining that show, and just watching, you know, when you get to watch certain performers like from the side of the stage and really see what they do. I mean, Michael Hutchence was just, you know, a god among men, you know. One of the best front people ever, you know. And so not, you know, like a little less frequently in terms of, you know, like bands we were like sharing stages with. But I will say there was one time when I don't even recall why we were invited to this, but our A&R guy, the band was in Los Angeles, and he was like, all right, come on, we're going to dinner. And his dinner guest was Apollonia from Purple Rain.
Ooh. And
that was a starstruck moment, because, you know, that whole, like, Prince and everybody who was involved with Prince holds, you know, I hold them in their own category of being up on this pedestal. And we're eating dinner with, you know, Apollonia Catero. And she said something at the end of the dinner when we were all saying goodbye that has always stuck with me. And she was like, remember, fellas, there's plenty of room at the top for all of us.
Beautiful.
And I was like, fuck yeah. And I was like, you know, in many ways, like that quote has kind of kept me centered, or at least, you know, willing to keep going for a long time, you know, because you know what, there is, you know, there's room at the top for a guy like me. I just have to figure out how to get there, you know.
Exactly.
Or if I honestly want to be there. You know, there's that question too that comes up from time to time.
True. Okay, we've got 4 more of these speed round questions.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're going to do them in 10 seconds each.
That was
Ready?
the slowest speed round question. Okay, I'm ready.
It's great. I love it every time. It happens the same way. It's great. All right. Do pineapples belong on pizza?
Pineapples belong everywhere.
Beautiful. Do you know the Muffin Man?
Not intimately.
Do you have a favorite brand of guitar or drums, I guess?
I like a lot of brands. I have a Fender and a Gibson, and I love them equally.
Beautiful. Do you prefer recording in studio or playing live?
I like making records. I'd love to play live, but I love making records. There's something about that makes me really happy.
That was very nice answer. I was gonna kind of just be like, all right, we're done, but I actually have to think about that for a second. That was a beautiful answer. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
We're done now. The speed round. That's done.
Okay. All right. So it's sped up considerably at the end, which is good.
Yeah. I try. It's something we're working on. But anyway, okay. So you were in a musical duo, John and Brittany. And you did a Kickstarter campaign to record a full-length album, raised about $10,000, which sounds pretty
grand. Yes.
Do you think that musicians use crowdfunding enough, or is it something they should consider using more? Do you have any tips on that? Let's put those all on the plate as questions.
I don't know that I have an opinion as to whether it's like used enough or not. I mean, one could argue that it's overused in general, because you see like a Kickstarter or a GoFundMe for just about everything under the sun these days. But yeah. I mean, if I have any advice, it's like know your audience and your network before you try to do something like that. I mean, particularly like, you know, Kickstarter, as anyone who's used it knows, is like an all or nothing proposition. So like if you don't make the goal, you get nothing. So, of course, you know, so make sure you got that one uncle that's willing to like throw down on a credit card for the last, you know, $1,000 if you're not there
right
on the last day. But, you know, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like, so that was the only time I used Kickstarter for anything, but it's not the first record I had crowdfunded. I actually was doing that kind of thing on my own from the very beginning of Ike. So, you know, pretty much like most of my independent records have had some level of crowdfunding to them. So I feel pretty experienced with it. Mm-hmm. And like I said, you know, you kind of need to know, you know, have a good sense of like who you think is really going to do this, and make sure that you offer value for what someone is doing. I mean, you're always going to have that percentage of people that's like, oh, I just want to support, you know, you don't have to give me anything, I just like you. And that's awesome. But I've been seeing a lot of, you know, somewhat half-assed crowdfunding campaigns from time to time where it's like, you know, oh, this is what you get for your $20 or whatever. Like, oh, all right. So you're really counting on somebody who just likes you and wants to support. So like my whole thing is, you know, exceed expectations with what you give back, you know, but also do it smart. Okay. Try not to blow all your money on postage.
Good call. Is that are those the reasons you think yours were so successful, or was there something you did that you think really made you good at it?
Well, I mean, I did have like a couple of, you know, what we could call under the radar crowdfunding campaigns prior to the Kickstarter that Brittany and I did, where I kind of knew what would be like a reasonable but also semi-ambitious number to shoot for. Mm-hmm. Like I knew we could get like 5,000, no problem. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, well, if we could do that, why don't we really try to like, you know, literally pay for the record instead of like being modest and paying for only half the record and trying to figure out where we're getting the other $5,000 or whatever. So
Sure.
there was that element of like, okay, let's try this, but I still had it in the back of my mind, like, like the campaign itself, I was really proud of it because like I thought it was pretty cleverly done. We already had the name of the record, which helped. The record was called Start Sinning. So like everything in the Kickstarter was kind of themed with that, whether it was like, like the different tiers would have like a song lyric or be named after a reference in a song or a song title or that kind of thing. And it just
really like had a sense for what they were giving money to.
Yeah, and it also just kind of looks like, this is an act that kind of has their shit together in that like they're presenting this whole thing. Like this record's not even recorded and they've already named it. They know how they're gonna get it out there. So that was kind of a fortunate aspect of that. Like, not everybody has all that stuff in place when they're just trying to like record a handful of songs and make a record, So I think that helped us a little bit.
Cool. So we've kind of mentioned it, once or twice here, but this memoir you just finished writing, the yin and the yang of it all, memories from the cusp, as told by a mixed race kid. I think I said that right. That's
the whole title. Yes, you did. You even did the parenthetical there. That was great.
I love it. That is a major accomplishment, by the way. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I mean, it was certainly a unique experience for me. I'm, when you've been writing songs your whole life, and you can potentially finish one in like an hour, taking 4 years to write something is a whole different experience. And I'm really excited about it. I've gotten into the phase where it's been done for a while. I'm trying to figure out the best situation to get it published, and that has proven to be a new challenge. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things where I got it in my mind like, oh, I could write a book, and then you get to the next phase like, well, how are you going to get it out there? Oh, I guess I can find a publisher, like I don't know.
Figure it out when I get there.
It was a very much cross that bridge when I get to it kind of mentality, because I had never, I might have, the longest prose I had ever written was be like, like 10-page paper on some high school, you know what I mean? And so I actually became a student of memoir and like took in like probably like 30 or 35 books over the past few years just to see like, how do they do it? How do you do this? And so there's a big learning curve with like how to, find your voice, all those things that make, writing something like that, like interesting to read as opposed to just like a recitation of events and facts and stuff.
Sure.
So
more like a biography as opposed to a memoir.
Right. So that was a process.
Autobiography. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
No, that's cool.
I think I got it. I think it's pretty good.
So we did kind of touch on this a little bit earlier with you talk a lot about identity, race, and fame in it, and we may have touched on this already, but what did those things mean in the context of your career? And you don't need to do any spoiler alerts with the book or anything.
Okay.
What's written in it, but
well, the whole idea of being on the cusp is, it's kind of like this running theme / joke in my life. Like I observed so many elements of, what people would call the rock and roll life, or, I was in the company of famous people all the time, really. And so a lot of my observations from that, kind of like having like one foot in it and one foot as more of like somebody who's just like looking at it, like it's a very like unique perspective, I think, because I'm getting a firsthand view of a lot of shit that goes on. But by the same token, like I never became like the household name, you know. Another thing I really put a lot of thought into is there's a lot of people like me, like people who have accomplished, you know, you read the litany of stuff at the beginning of this.
That I did.
It's not nothing, you know, but by the same token, I'm not a millionaire. You know, I'm one of those people where it's like, John Faye, if you know, you know. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the more I kind of like thought about that, I was like, you know, I could name like 10 people off the top of my head who I'm friends with from this music community alone that are kind of in that boat. People who have, you know, people who have toured as, you know, the guitar player for like big acts, you know, our friend Darnell, people like him. Mm-hmm. You know, like these are people who are people that I think need to be celebrated in their own way, because, you know, it made me think a lot about, you know, if you want to call it like, you know, the fame industrial complex where, you know, like that's the goal, like that's the ultimate goal is fame and fortune, right? That's the American dream, right? But like the more I thought about it, and especially every time that I was in a position where I was starting over, I come to realize like that's really not my motivation. Maybe it was at one time, or maybe I thought it was, or maybe never gave it that much thought one way or the other. But like my motivation is to be happy and do the things that make me happy. And being a creative person is the thing that does that for me. And so whatever happens in terms of, you know, what kind of like financial rewards or, you know, fame or any of that stuff, like if that's a byproduct of doing the things that I want to do to make me happy, then I guess I'll accept that. But like that's not the reason that I do it. And so, you know, that's why like I made a big point of like subtitling the book like, you know, stories from the cusp, because, you know, I don't know if you ever saw the documentary 20 Feet from Stardom. Did you ever see that movie?
I did not, no.
It's basically a documentary about backup singers. So they're kind of like the unsung people that are like on stage, but they're really like killer musicians. Any one of them could have been a star.
Sure.
You know, and so one of the things that kind of like fascinates me is, you know, the working musician, like the person that is just out there grinding and doing it for, you know, probably pretty pure reasons, you know, as opposed to, you know, the person whose mentality is like, well, I want to be on The Voice so that I can become famous.
Sure.
You know, like I have a fundamental just aversion to how being a musician has been kind of like framed in our society for the past however many years. You know, like, I don't know. We're getting into a side of me where it's like a lot more, you know, like I feel like very outside of mainstream society, but I am not completely removed from it because I'm trying to do things that require interaction and an audience. So
absolutely, yeah, no,
that's why I am on. That's the long-winded explanation as to why I am always on the cusp.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You gotta join them, you know, and to get done what you want to do in particular. But
yeah, but you know, finding your people who you are kindred spirits with is another kind of like really beautiful aspect of that. You know, I mean, I've met so many great musicians and just artists and just creative people in all aspects of the business who I do feel like are in it for reasons that I can relate to, you know? And so like, I just try to like align myself with that as much as I can.
Well, from everything you're saying, I like this side of you, and I definitely want to see what this memoir is all about once it gets published. So you got to keep us in the loop on that, all right?
I sure will. Thank you.
And also, side note, I did notice you describe having some adventures, some crazy adventures. You had a run-in with the KKK Grandmaster. Do we have to wait and read it, or will you give us a little snippet of what it is?
Oh, a Grand Wizard. A Grand Wizard, yes.
A wizard, Grand Wizard. I'm sorry.
Like KKK Grandmaster Flash. No, that doesn't work.
No,
yeah, I mean, long and the short of it, we were actually playing, speaking of New Orleans, we were supposed to play in New Orleans for a big radio festival, and our manager, because we had a day off the day before, got a last minute gig at a tiny little bar in Slidell, Louisiana. And so we're about to play this show, a little bit resenting our manager, because we're like, we could have just been hanging out in New Orleans, and now we're like in the sticks playing. I mean, Slidell is a perfectly fine place, but the long and the short of it is the bar manager knocks on the door and informs us that David Duke is there to see us.
To see you.
Specifically us, like wants to talk to us. So of course, the fear that runs through a guy like me in the deep South, being informed that some guy who was the head of the KKK is there and wants to talk to me, I was just like, ready to run out of a window and just
exit strategy.
Yeah, so it was a very bizarre meeting. It ended up that he did not, in fact, want to kill us. He actually wanted the band's autograph for his daughter, who had heard our song on the radio, which was one of those one of those situations where, it's like, of course, if you were to have this story happen to you in 2021, it would be like, I'm not signing that for that guy. You should be ashamed of yourself for being, but as it turned out, we were just like, whatever it takes to not die, let's get a Sharpie. And so I actually do write about that in the book. And I think I say something like, who knows, maybe to this very day, like sitting in some dusty shoebox in some closet somewhere is a signed copy of Whirligig that owned by David Duke's daughter, And I was just like, so that's just one of scores of weird situations we found ourselves in.
Well, thank you for giving me a little piece of that story. That was definitely worth it.
Okay, well.
Okay, this is one question I ask everybody that I interview. I just want to know, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give your past self to help you get to where you are now a little bit easier, faster, or just,
Oh, wow. That's
from back in the day, John Faye.
Well, if I was, to give that person advice, probably just to know that things were going to be okay, in spite of all the obstacles. And, I feel like all the experiences I went through as a kid, and there were messed up things that I went through. That's all stuff that I think played such a huge role in the person I am now. So do I regret going through any of that? No, I don't. I mean, it sucked to go through it at the time, but it did cause, young John a fair amount of anxiety and feeling less than, and like, where do I fit in, man? Like, that's the question.
Right.
Oh, nowhere. Okay. So if there was anything that I maybe could do to alleviate that kid's anxiety a little bit, I guess I would want to. But then again, I'm like, greedy present me is like, well, I wouldn't be as motivated and have done all the stuff that I did, so I don't know that going back in time makes a ton of sense for me. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing that is important to me is to be kind to that younger self in your mind, in your present mind. Mm-hmm. Because, none of us are perfect. None of us, has a spotless, record of behavior.
Sure.
As a teenager or a young adult or whatever. As long as you're not committing felonies, be good to yourself. Don't beat yourself up too much,
Good advice.
Yeah.
Do you have any new projects that we should be looking for other than the memoir? And you said Orbit was coming out?
Yeah. So Orbit's coming out in the fall. That's my first new music in like 5 years. So I'm excited to finally have a song out. And the cool thing about that one is I actually co-wrote it with my friend Reese Ratliff, who I'm sure you guys know well. So pretty good collab. So the other couple of things I'd love to mention is the Caulfields have a big show in September, on September 10th at the Bottle and Cork in Dewey Beach. And on the 9th, we are premiering a brand new concert movie that we've been working on behind the scenes this whole time. Actually, our guitar player, our new member, Brett Talley, directed it, edited it, mixed the audio for it. So it's called 26 Candles, which is a little, kind of a joke on the fact that we weren't able to celebrate our 25th anniversary the way we wanted yesterday, or yesterday, not last year. Yeah. It was yesterday. Felt like yesterday. So we're really excited about that. It's a really, really cool, it's almost like a sort of a documentary / concert film, which we're very excited to share. And lastly, I started doing Patreon in July, which I've been doing for a little under 2 months now, and it's been really a cool experience. So if anybody wants to check out what I'm up to on there, they can go to patreon.com/JohnKimFay.
That Patreon does sound like a fun place to be if you're someone's fan. So definitely.
I've been having a blast. I've been making videos and stuff that I would never have the time or ability to do if it wasn't on that platform. So It's cool.
Very cool. Speaking of platforms, where else can we find you online?
Well, I'm on everything now except for Twitter, which I will never be on because it's a cesspool. But basically, if you go to my regular website, which is just johnfay.com, it's the easiest one to remember probably. All my socials are linked on there, and I keep it updated pretty well. So everything you need to know. I think you may have visited that website to be so thorough with my bio material.
Twice. I may have read it a few times over.
So it's a thorough work, that website.
That's great. No, but okay, anywhere except for Twitter. That's
yeah, pretty much everywhere but Twitter.
Got it. Cool.
I just started my TikTok last week, so there's not much on there, but I'm gonna get it.
Maybe by the time this comes out, you'll have some funny little dance videos or something for us.
Some stuff. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be dancing, but I'm gonna do my thing.
Join the cool hip crowd now with all that TikTok.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
That's funny. Well, I appreciate your time today so much. Thank you for being here and answering all of my random questions.
I had a blast, Natalie. It was so much fun to talk to you, and thanks for having me. I don't know how expert my answers were, but
they were great. They were good. Everybody's experience that comes on here is just so different, but it just goes to show that you gotta continue doing what you're doing and have faith that things are going to work out. And that's kind of what, you know, a lot of this is. And those tidbits of information and little advice that you have to give, you know, musicians and artists, or, you know, anyone else that's looking to participate in the industry, I think those are helpful for everybody. So, you know, appreciate it.
I'm glad. Well, thank you again. It was really, really fun, and hope to see you, you know, in person one of these years. Hopefully.
One of these years, right? Oh my gosh, that's true. That's true.
Well, last time I saw you was like, where were we? Oh, I think it was like Reese's show at the 76ers thing. Remember the
yep. At the 76ers field house with it was him, I believe, opening for
King something or other.
Callaway.
Yeah.
That was it, King Callaway. Oh, we love it. We love it.
So that was anyway,
so this was fantastic. Thank you. And everybody who's watching, thank you for watching. We will have all of John's information down in the description below. If you guys have any comments or any questions, go ahead and pop them down there as well. Don't forget to ring the bell wherever the bell is to subscribe and get the information that we're giving you here at Gable Music Ventures on all of our YouTube series. We have with Shug Daniels and her tips, and with me here at the interviews with the experts. So in any case, for this week, we're good. And thanks again, John. Bye, everyone.
See you soon, Natalie.